Okay, well, thanks for coming to this elective here. So I'm Shenanigasm, but right now I'm just Mary. So anyways, my home burn is Flipside, and I've done safety side. I think this is my third or fourth safety side. Um, so my background, I was a teacher for 13 years. 2 of those years I worked at Texas School for the Deaf, and I worked with students in off-campus internships, and I coached like their employers how to communicate with them, and I coached the students how to communicate with their employers. So that's kind of my background in that. And so the Austin area is the second largest deaf community. The biggest one is in Washington, D.C., and then the second, third biggest one, like we're the second, but if you combine Riverside and San Francisco area, that's a bigger community than Austin. But so we have a large deaf community here, and sometimes you can go your whole life in Austin and not interact with them. And I know at Flipside, occasionally we have some deaf and hard of hearing participants, but I personally haven't run into any. I have at the Big Burn. I know there's a camp called Dirty Hands that's for deaf and hard of hearing participants there. And I've run into a couple people in the wild at the Big Burn as well who sign, and it's been pretty awesome. So one thing I would start with, saying a person is deaf is not an offensive term. Like if you call them hearing impaired, that can be actually offensive. So deaf kind of refers to being culturally deaf, like they have a culture surrounding their language and their deafness. Hard of hearing kind of gets lumped into that too. And hard of hearing usually refers to a person who uses like assistive technology, like a cochlear implant or hearing aids. And they speak to communicate too, but they prefer to sign, or they sign and sometimes they speak. So American Sign Language is a 3-dimensional language. It is completely different from English. There are about 10,000 unique American Sign Language signs, so like 10,000, and then there's 500,000 English words. So they can all be interchangeable, but it takes like a lot of creativity, and there's a lot of aspects of American Sign Language that we don't really have in English, and vice versa. So anyways, have any of you in your official capacity at a burn run into deaf and hard of hearing participants? Like you can raise your hand. Cool. Okay. So, and do any of y'all want to share about that experience real quick?
I would love to.
Yeah, great. Gregory, go for it.
So I was in Israel at Midburn, and I'm a body painter. And these two people were trying to negotiate between each other, and they were both deaf. And I had to interpret that she wanted me to paint him, okay, whatever, some sort of interesting dynamic. I followed them back to their camp. Had about 20 people in their camp. They all gathered up some stuff. We went over to another dance place. They put a huge box in the middle of the dance floor, and each one took a turn inside the box.
Yeah.
With the box closed up. And then when they were outside the box, they put a balloon chest to chest with each other. Or actually, they put a box chest to chest with each other so they could feel the bass. And then they had a balloon in their hand when they were dancing around so they could feel the music. That blew my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for my TED Talk.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I also used to work with Austin City Limits with the deaf and hard of hearing access team. So, and I was kind of like the bouncer for that area, and the interpreters would be up on stage and stuff, but you're right there up against the speakers. And yeah, a lot of deaf people enjoy music more than I do actually, and like to experience it through that tactile sensation. So yeah, anyone else want to share an experience that they had?
I once met a deaf ranger. This was a long time ago. And she was really interesting. She ended up being a really, really good ranger because everybody had to slow down, and as you know, agitated participants had to slow down so that she could understand them. And her partner talked to me about it later. She said, yeah, it was a really, really good way to leverage what she had to her advantage.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's really like putting yourself out there for that person. That's amazing. So to talk about communication with deaf and hard of hearing individuals, the main thing to remember is every individual is different and they have different communication preferences. Like some people might be okay with lip reading, and I'll talk more about that later. Some people want to write back and forth on paper. Some people want to gesture with you and get you to understand the meaning through that. So it really, deaf people are used to meeting hearing people who don't sign. So not being able to sign or not finding someone who can sign to interpret for you, that's fine. They're used to interacting with people who have no sign language skills. And because that's, the world that they live in whenever they go to the store, whenever they go anywhere, So a lot of times they'll initiate the kind of communication that they want to have. So like they'll get out their phone and they'll text something and they'll show it to you, and then you'll text something back and hand it to them and just hand it back and forth, or the same thing with paper. Some will be comfortable writing back and forth and texting, but again, going back to the linguistic differences, whenever I was working at Texas School for the Deaf, I taught mostly juniors and seniors, and most of them had a second or third grade reading level. So if you were to write back and forth with them, there's still a lot of chance for miscommunication and whatnot. But it was really interesting working there. And when I was interviewing, they're like, yeah, this is the reality of the juniors and seniors here. And I thought they were exaggerating. I'm like, there's no way. But a lot of them, they came from families where like their family doesn't sign. Maybe the home language is something other than English, like Spanish, and their parents don't sign. So at school, they have American Sign Language and written English, but they can't communicate at home. So a lot of linguistic differences there. And another thing to point out real quick, ASL, American Sign Language, is local to the United States. I don't understand British Sign Language. If I see someone signing British Sign Language, which, they speak English over there, but if I see them signing British Sign Language, I can't understand what they're spelling. A lot of the signs are different. And Australian Sign Language is I think they have the same alphabet, but a lot of the signs are different. So there's about 120 different sign languages around the world. And there's not a universal sign language. There's one that they sometimes use for presentation and stuff, but it's more of a gestural sign language. It's not a specific thing that you can like take classes on. Let's see. Going to lip reading. So lip reading is so hard. I don't know if you've ever tried to do it yourself. Like, like maybe your speaker's broken or something, you're watching a video and you're trying to get it. It is so hard to do. The accuracy for a skilled lip reader is 25 to 35% accuracy. The rest is like playing fill in the blank. So it's an emotionally exhausting, mentally draining activity to lip read. And some people are okay with this. And some of them use like hearing aids and they can hear you. And then as long as they can see your face, that works, which been an interesting thing this year with mask and everything, because a lot of your grammar for American Sign Language is how you hold your mouth or your facial expressions and stuff. So you need your mouth. So if it's covered, it gets a little complicated. Like it's still possible, but it takes away some of from the experience. So, and if you are ever talking with someone who is trying to lip read or trying to kind of engage in communication through gesturing and watching you talk, it's very important to maintain eye contact and to make sure that you're not blocking your face as much as possible. Like, again, if it's masked, that's different, but that, that you're not, turning away to say something, because that just totally disrupts the communication. And you want to speak normally, and you want to speak in a normal tone. You don't want to be louder than you normally are. Just speak normally. and enunciate normally. And yeah, and if the person has a problem with what you're saying, they'll probably ask you to repeat it, or they'll change the mode of communication to maybe writing it down. Yeah, and another thing, so if there's ever like a really complicated situation, like somebody's camp member is sick and you're trying to explain this to a deaf individual or something of that nature, and writing back and forth is not working, talking's not working. If there's cell service, like if there's phone service in the area that you're at, most of the time, and the person has a phone, most of the time they'll have an app on their phone for video relay service, VRS. And what that is, they can make a call to your phone and it goes through an interpreter. So they'll call and they'll be signing to the person in the phone. There's an interpreter on their screen who is then voicing to you. So, and the rules with doing that is you are supposed to be in a separate room. So it'd be like maybe someone's inside of Sanctuary and somebody is standing on the outside receiving the call. So that would be a way to communicate complicated thoughts and ideas and things that need to be communicated specifically. So, and again, it would depend on cell service, but every deaf person I know has at least like two of those, like they have Sorensen or Purple or whatever. So yeah. Let's see. So, okay. So like, say you're just hanging out with a deaf person and you're trying to be friends or something, like you're wanting to have a conversation. It's really good if it's in a group situation where it's like one-on-one, like you're talking to this person, not like there's a group of 10 people standing around. Because we as hearing people, what happens is we're used to knowing like, okay, so I'm done talking and then you hear someone else start talking and you don't necessarily look at them immediately, but you hear that someone else is talking. So whenever you're signing, you have to like look at the person and otherwise you miss stuff. So it's like, if I'm looking at this person over here and we're talking and I'm trying to understand what they're saying, and then somebody else joins in the conversation, I don't know that that person has started a sentence until maybe like that person stops talking and they're still looking at me, but then maybe they look over there and I've missed half the sentence. So it's something to, be aware of, like to make sure that you're clear on who's talking. And if someone else is talking, you look to the other person. So, yeah. Anyways, do y'all have any questions? Anyone have any curiosities or questions or stories to share or anything?
I do.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I was an OBGYN nurse for 16 years.
Uh-huh.
Several patients, deaf or mute or both. And I would sign or talk to them, or we would write mostly. That way they get the full communication when it's medical, especially if they're in labor. It's really hard when they're in labor and you're in a lot of pain. And both of you are under a certain amount of stress to understand the other person. And when you're trying to deliver, you're in the delivery room with them. I noticed after my first one, I went back because I grew up and learned language when I was a kid. I did not realize how much I did not know until then, or the different nuances that it has changed since then either. And when someone is upset, in pain, stressed, or confused because of some other surrounding happening to them or with them, they may get more confused, more strained, and even harder to understand being deaf, trying to sign, trying to talk, trying to anything at all. And then when they get what I call spastic, because they're so scared they can't continue, you then have to determine how to take care of them as well in a medical issue. I've actually only had one person that I've had to deal with at a burn so far. Well, technically two, that were hearing and speech impaired both. And it's vastly different in a one-on-one situation or a one-on group situation of people that don't know each other with the two people that are speech impaired. It's a guessing game a lot. The best way that I've learned is I always carry pen and paper, or I have a whiteboard with me all the time with dry erase markers. And I draw a line. My half is one half, their half is the other, and it's faster to go. Even if you get less of the words in, you still are able to understand a little bit better, if they can even comprehend to do that, depending on what medical state they're in the field of birth.
Yeah. So that's something in professional medical situations like that, like whenever they're at a hospital or something, they're legally required to have an interpreter. So, yeah, and that's something modern times, they sometimes do like a screen and it'll be an interpreter through the screen. And every deaf person I know hates that, and because it lags and it's frustrating, but they prefer an in real life interpreter, which is really expensive, like for a hospital to have an interpreter on staff waiting to be on call like all the time. So yeah, and it's something, yeah, it can get tricky whenever you're in that kind of situation where a person's stressed.
The interpreter we had was rarely actually there, and most of my patients refused to use the on screen. It just didn't work very well. Either the lag and they couldn't understand, and they could understand better through the communication of the minimal sign language I had at the time, or the writing, or just gesturing back and forth for the majority of the portions. The doctor I worked for at the time, she would just write it all down and type it all out on the computer because she was so fast at it, and give them a board so they could ask the questions, and then she would keep going. And the one set of patients I had, they were blind and they were deaf.
Oh, yeah.
So we would sign through my hand with the minimal skills that I had at it at the time. And it went so much easier. They brought a machine with them the third and fourth time they came. Before, when they first found out they were pregnant, it was a lot harder. Halfway through the pregnancy, they brought a machine that I thought was just amazing. They would lay their fingers on the machine, and it had braille that would go through, and she would hook it into her computer, and it ran on a little system that would just come up and lift those little portions up and let them run it under their fingers, and she could understand and read it that way better.
Yeah, the whole deaf blind world and culture, like in tactile signing, and it's amazing. Like I don't have a lot of personal experience with that. So it's interesting at Texas School for the Deaf, if a student is deaf blind, they actually go to the blind school, and there's specialists there, and the place is set up like logistically better for a blind person to walk around. So, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing the technology they have, like I forget what that machine's called, but that pops up the braille as the text goes through. Yeah.
The reason I brought it up was because a lot of people don't either use technology or allow technology at some burns. And some burns it's necessary, or some people it's necessary. And if you come across someone that wants to hook that up so they can communicate and they're having a hard time talking to you, if you happen to see that they have a machine and they keep pointing at it and then pointing at their ears, which is what this particular lady did, let them plug it up, let them talk to you. They may not even be able to explain because her husband was deaf as well. So it was very difficult to understand what this machine was for. And people look at it and go, we don't have that. We don't have technology, and I'm not going to go get a laptop. Go get the laptop. Let them do it. It will help you vastly more as well as them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would hope anyone at a burn would be down with that, even if there was a technology policy or something. I would hope people would have that understanding and empathy there. So something that reminded me while you were saying that a lot of times deaf people are uncomfortable using their voice. Just because you're deaf doesn't mean your voice doesn't work, but you have to go through like years and years and years of speech training, depending on your level of deafness, to have recognizable speech. And it is exhausting to pronounce words that you can't hear. So a lot of them are really shy about using their voice. Like it was something with my students that I always felt super awesome whenever we'd get to the point where they'd be cool, like voicing sounds as they signed. So it's kind of like a special thing. And again, like individual preference with people who are deaf and hard of hearing, that's like the main thing to remember. Like they'll guide you in communication, and just to be patient and to go slow, and to be respectful, to look at them, to not turn away and say something to someone else. Another big thing is like, if you don't understand what they're saying, tell them that you don't understand. Be like, I don't know. I don't understand, communicate that you don't understand. Don't just be like, oh, never mind. No, don't worry about it. That's like the worst thing you can do. It's super insulting to dismiss them. Even like, say you were trying to communicate something really simple, like you were asking them if they wanted juice or water, and you got frustrated with it, and you're just like, never mind. It's kind of like, I don't know, most people, deaf people that I know, it's kind of triggering whenever you say, never mind, just don't worry about it. It's not important, things like that. So to take the effort to communicate what you want to say and to understand what they're trying to communicate. That's really the main takeaway I want all of y'all to have.
Mary, we do have a couple of questions.
Oh, okay. Are they in the chat?
There's a couple in the chat, and Sparky also had one.
Okay, great. Sparky, go ahead. We'll do that first.
Oh, okay. Well, you kind of answered my first question, and that is, what do we call you? An interpreter?
Oh, I'm not certified as an interpreter. I'm a certified ASL teacher. So
Okay.
I have that certification. I purposely never got around to doing my interpreter certification because I do not want to do that as a job. Like interpreting, it's this amazingly emotionally draining profession where you're communicating with someone directly. You're making eye contact with a deaf individual, and you're taking in whatever the hearing person's saying. So if they're giving them bad news, like, hey, you have cancer, blah, 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 I'm the one telling this person that they have cancer or that they're going to die, or their friend died. And it's like, in the way, you can't just drop the emotion. I have to, if someone's yelling at that person, I have to express it as if I'm yelling at the deaf individual, even, like I don't feel that way towards the person, but I have to communicate it that way. So I interpreted for my students in their like work site settings, and very competent in that, but I do not do that professionally on purpose. So
okay, but you read sign language and could tell me what somebody who's deaf is saying?
Oh yeah. Okay. At a burn, yeah. I know there's a couple in our community that can do that too. I think.
And I wasn't really looking for a certification. I was just like, you're obviously somebody who can help me communicate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I asked that is I used to be LLC for Flipside, and we had a situation where a person came and their interpreter or partner wasn't around. We couldn't find the person. This person was having some distress from overindulgence and couldn't communicate to us, and we couldn't communicate back, and we were finding ourselves in a little bit of a bind. And what just shot through my head when we started talking about having this session was it would be nice to have people like you come up to the ranger station and say, hey, if you ever need somebody to help interpret, I know how to do sign language and read lips, or I have the tool set to help you.
Yeah.
It's like we have a couple that comes every year, and they're arborists, so they know how to use chainsaws professionally, and we needed that one time.
Yeah.
So you find it easy to help find people like yourself that could step up for that game?
Yeah, I could round into some people. I know at least Froggy signs fluently, and it's something like I don't know of any. I personally have not run into anybody at Flipside who signs, like who is deaf, and I've heard that they've been there, but for having the second largest deaf community, like we're lacking that diversity there. So, yeah. And I have some friends in Austin who go to the Big Burn, but they haven't been to Flipside. So, yeah, I don't know.
All right.
But yeah.
We have 5 more minutes, and there's one question in the chat, or kind of 2 questions in the chat that piggyback off each other, and then we've got 3 more questions with the hands.
Okay.
Or 2 more, sorry.
Are we required to gain consent prior to treating? How do you recommend communicating with and gaining consent from a deaf potential patient? Again, I would go with how they're communicate. If you can't find someone who signs, and this is like a big deal, I would see how they're trying to communicate. I would try the VRS thing, see if you can do that through a phone. And try writing. That's what I would do in that situation. And how do you evaluate the level of consciousness in the evaluations? Like, would that be like a sanctuary thing? That's kind of how I'm reading that. Like their mental state, their like, yeah. That would be something that would be tricky, because it's like, even I would have a hard time knowing, like, is this how this person normally is, or is this like completely off base? So that would be something I would just try and communicate, writing it back and forth on paper and see how that goes. And if their handwriting's all over the place, they're probably have consumed a substance, or, aren't in their baseline sobriety. So, yeah. And we had some, was there another one in the chat, or I think that was chat.
For the chat.
Okay. Any hands?
Same.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to actually start by saying I am hard of hearing, and I have been counseling folks at Gallaudet University in DC for 2 years. And my ASL is pretty basic, but my working with interpreters is really, really high, because I made sure to get medical interpreters from my clients' insurance plans for every sessions. One thing I'd love to recommend if people are curious about this topic is go hang out in deaf bars. The best thing you can do is actually just hang around deaf people and watch how they use nonverbal communication beyond the language. I would also, a thing I learned this year that has actually been really useful just in general at like protests and stuff because of masks is Google has this thing called Live Transcribe. So again, you've got the issue of the text, but I literally hold my phone up like this, and you've got black screen, white letters on Live Transcribe. Which has been really useful for lots of reasons, including just loud settings when you can't hear what a person's saying. So it's a great tool. I would love it, Mary, if you could speak a little bit about use of touch in deaf culture, because it's different from our kind of like norms around touch consent at some of the regionals.
Yeah, so let me see. So a lot of times deaf people, they tap each other to get each other's attention. Sometimes it's a little forceful and whatnot. So it's something like in those situations, like you don't really ask consent. It's something that is part of the culture. And I believe, I'm trying to think, acting with hearing people, I think most people have experience with that and have an awareness that hearing culture is different. But yeah, there's a lot of touch, tapping on the shoulder to get someone's attention. Yeah. So, and waving in front of their face, flashing lights, things like that. So I think we're almost out of time. So if y'all have any other questions for me or anything, you can find me on the Facebooks. It's Mary Burns, and Burns like fires.